Representative Josh Tanner, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. We finally make it.
I know.
I've been trying to get you on the show for a bit now. You're a busy man. I really appreciate you taking the time here.
Yeah, no, happy to.
So look, again, you have a bill presentation in like 45 minutes. So let's get to it. You guys are bringing death penalty for child molesters forward. I think it's tomorrow, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Talk to me about this, because I did speak with Robert Gillis, who's very concerned about Idaho tough on crime, and he's very concerned about things of this nature and being part of legislation. I talked to him earlier in the session, but I haven't heard anything else about this. So it is getting presented. Talk to me about it.
Well, first off, the death penalty for child molestation is actually, the Supreme Court ruled that unconstitutional. It was cruel and too cruel of a punishment to actually to it. We were supposedly at the point in time that we were actually moving into away from those types of crimes in general. And our society was actually getting better, is what there kind of was one of the Supreme Court arguments at the time. Like
we're moving away from people being terrible.
Yes.
That's good to know, I guess. Whether or not it is or not.
But the problem was it wasn't actually true. We actually saw the exact opposite. And we actually are seeing an increase, especially with the internet and everything else going on, the trafficking going on. We are seeing an increase in this. And it's not just Idaho, it's across the country. But what we've done, and we ran the bill last year, and again, it's just to go. I mean, we'll have that case that comes out, that truly heinous case that comes out. Once that case comes out, then we'll turn around and hopefully charge somebody with the death penalty. Once that gets done, it'll get peeled up to the Supreme Court. We'll go to the Supreme Court. We'll actually fight it then through the Supreme Court. Based on the current makeup, in my opinion, I think that changes. I think that decision actually changes, and I think that we should have the death penalty for child molesters. But what we had, and this is where we were struggling a little bit with our bill that we had last year versus the one we have currently, is the aggravating factors. So we really listed out a detailed of aggravating factors. Going through the aggravating factors, every aggravating factor we'd had to write down and go through and debate over would just pretty much piss me off, because I'm like, just this alone, the person should be killed. But it is, what we're stating is that you actually have to have two of those aggravating factors to be able to even qualify for it. Now, its current law is lewd conduct with a child under the age of 16. So 16 to 12, if those multiple aggravating factors, you could get life in prison, or when you get life in prison, you actually have a minimum of 25 years that you have to stay in. You're not going to
25 without parole.
Without parole.
Gotcha. And this is current law.
No, this is what the bill actually is.
Okay. Understood.
And then beyond that, if you're under the age, so if you're really 11 and under, you would actually, in these heinous crimes, 2 or more of those crimes actually aggravating factors happened, you could get the death penalty, or you can get life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years without parole. If they decided not to go. But that 11 under is where we placed in the death penalty aspect. So if you want to go harm children in that way, you should be dead.
I mean, it is hard to make a case against that.
Well, they try.
They do. And here's one actually for you. I spoke with Ron Nate earlier on in the session, and I believe this bill came up, and I think it was in January when we were chatting. And he said, look, if you do something like that, you have a certain level of deterrence towards a crime right now in existence. So it's like, if you're a child molester, you got to weigh cost benefit analysis of like, all right, like, what do I get out of this? And then, of course, if I get caught, what does it cost me? All of these different things. And his articulation was, well, look, if you make it so that the cost is so substantial that it could literally be loss of life, then this horrible perpetrator has a different cost benefit analysis and then has a different scheme with how to deal with this, which is essentially, okay, if I leave the kid alive, my life is at risk. But if I just, for instance, kill the victim, which is horrible even to say, then I decrease my risk of getting, the death penalty myself. And he was saying, look, that's a concern that people should consider. Like, is that something you guys are worried about?
I mean, personally, no. The death penalty at that point in time is up on both ends. So usually if somebody murders somebody, usually that eventually gets figured out and found. Usually, especially with today's technology, with the advancements and everything we're doing within crime, that just will fast track you for the death penalty no matter what. Is it a deterrent aspect? I hope so. Beyond that,
yeah, I would hope so too. Like,
beyond that, it's funny when people fear. They're like, well, what if they did this? What if we did this? What happens if this? There's always that chance of something. Every bill that you pass, that you're like, well, it works in this scenario, but in this one, no. The problem with the legislature as of today, we tend to pass bills with this wide open space of, because we don't usually narrow it down, and then it usually goes to court, and then courts come in and then they decide, here's the law, it's actually over here. This is part of the problem with the legislature. Instead of coming back and addressing it, going, no, we do not like that. We want the law to be over here, and we're going to define it a little bit better. We don't, and we let the courts define it. This is the problem that I've seen within the legislature, not just at the state legislatures across the country, but within the federal side as well, is the courts are determining, and they're writing law often based on case law. And we need to take that when we don't like where they ended up, we need to go write a law to make sure it's where we actually want it.
Because it's, again, essentially they're allowed to determine what we can and can't do through case law, instead of the legislature taking the bull by the horn, so to speak, and saying, no, we're going to write a law specific to this.
That's correct.
Gotcha. What are the costs associated with this? Because it's my understanding that in engaging a death penalty, it costs an enormous amount of money to the state and the taxpayers, because you obviously have to house this person, and there's like unending appeals that are engaged and things of that nature. Is that actually a greater or less financial impact than, say, just having somebody with like life in prison?
Well, either way, there's a cost aspect to it.
Sure.
That is,
we're going to have to do something with these people. Yeah.
But I also look at it as you have to consider the victim as well. As what are these crimes? Are you going to
like, if justice costs money, then we're going to pay that money because there's justice deserved.
That's, in my opinion, that's 100%. Right. Those are dollars. I mean,
right.
If it was me, I know we've got the dang 8th Amendment, but if we could go fence off an area out there towards Mountain Home and sell tickets to go to allow people to go out there and have fun shooting at child molesters, I think I would personally be all over that. But that's just me personally. So
that's just my jam. I don't know.
I think biblically, you go back even biblically. It states you'd rather have a millstone around your neck. You'd rather be sunk to the bottom of the sea. You'd rather be dead than.
I'm not in any, like, yeah, I'm like, I get it. You have somebody who commits a violent sexual act against an 11-year-old. There is no punishment severe enough. Like, I'm just, what I'm trying to flush out is, I'm an idiot. Okay. So this makes sense to me, but I'm a total idiot. So like, but other people I've heard be like, well, that's not the best idea. It's like, okay, what are the arguments against it? I just don't understand. And again, I have limited understanding of all this stuff.
Again, I think cruel and useless punishment is where a lot of people lean to. Also, they lean to, well, what if they didn't actually commit those crimes? That's why when we have in there's very, very strict aggravating factors that are provable aggravating factors.
Right.
Now with the DNA testing and everything else that goes on, we know exactly what usually happened within that.
Right.
What I see happening more so is I see potentially, if this is going to get put on the table, then it's the plea deal that makes it a stronger deal. We've had guys up in northern Idaho just recently get let off with probation for actually trying to grab a child, no one's sex offender, and yet let back out. We are seeing the reoccurrence rate for people that are sex offenders, for child sex offenders, that their reoccurrence rate is actually usually really high. So it is a sickness. Sucks for them to have that sickness, but sorry, I don't want them to walk around their streets. I don't want them to be around, wander around the neighborhoods.
Right. And to be clear, this is not like a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing. This is not like, hey, I'm a senior in high school and my girlfriend's a sophomore and, I turned 19 and she's still like, this is not what we're talking about.
There's already laws that kind of define that portion out. So,
right. And to an earlier point, I wanted to come back to it. When you're talking about the prevalence of predators in our world today, and especially as it relates to the internet, I could not agree with you more. Like there is a real problem that the vast majority of people don't understand. Specifically, like if you look 20 years ago, we really only had like one type of predator, right? And that was, a sports coach or a religious leader or a teacher or somebody who was close enough to children and could gain access to them in the absence of their parents. Like you didn't have that many situations where that happened. And it was really like, it was just a risk to engage in this. Now you have 4. You have the original people who are like, say, a sports coach or something. Like I know
family members, uncles,
things like that. Yeah. So you have the classic terrible people that were willing to overcome that geographic and temporal proximity. They had to be where the kid was at the time the kid was there, and they had to overcome like having the parents around. You have them, but now you have like people that live under bridges and stuff because they can gain access to children through social media platforms. The kids never even see them until they actually go and meet them. The parents never know that these people are talking and grooming their children. And the people under the bridge, the homeless, like I call them bench warmers, they can just go to like public library computer banks and engage in this all day long for free. So you have those people. Those didn't exist 20 years ago. Like they just flat out didn't exist. Then you have people that are extorting children that are either in different states or internationally. I had Representative Schertzen, who was talking about they had prosecuted a case where this poor girl who was, I think, a 7th grader in eastern Idaho got preyed upon by a guy who lived in like Michigan or something.
Yeah.
And like unbelievable. And he made contact with her through social media. And then eventually, like he did, terrible things, and they were able to actually extradite him, or not extradite him, transport. You don't extradite between states, right? You just transport him over.
Transfer.
I don't know these details. But the point is, that's somebody who's not even in the state. And then, of course, you have umpteen examples of people internationally, either Russia, Ivory Coast, whatever it is, doing these things. And then finally, the worst one is you have teenagers doing it to other teenagers, right? Because now they have these anonymous, you can get an anonymous social media platform and engage in extortion acts and terrible things like that. So like the world has become considerably more dangerous for young people. Like we are not going in the direction of, oh, there are fewer counts of this. It's like, no, exponentially more. It's dark stuff. Dark stuff. Do you have anything that's a little bit more positive, a little bit more shiny that we can talk about?
House Bill 40, the income tax cut bill, did get out of the Senate floor, so it is
great
over to the governor at this point in time. So
great. And how much is this? That drops like $250 million or something.
Yeah, a little over that. Yeah.
Okay.
We got to make sure that it's technically the highest tax cut in state history.
Do we have a budget from JFAC yet?
Well, no, we don't actually have a budget. We have a revenue number.
Sorry, do we have an estimated revenue,
yes.
An official revenue number?
Yes, that was set yesterday.
Oh, fantastic. I was speaking with Senator Ward Ankelking just a couple days ago, and just like, no, we don't have anything yet. Okay, so that was said yesterday. Great. So we have our revenue target then.
That's correct.
Okay, and so the 250 plus million fits within our revenue target.
Oh, yeah. And it did, even with, no matter where you ended up, I mean, that portion of it fit in. And we'll balance it out. I mean, in the end, it's balancing out. Right now, we're setting a lot of the budgets. A lot of the budgets, there's cuts. I sit on JFAC as well. I'm usually the loud guy that hammers on the agencies based on what they're doing with our money.
Sure.
This isn't free money. This is a great sacred resource that the public is entrusting the government with. And there's a lot of waste that goes on. There's a lot of areas where we can tighten up. Government is not a financial, it's not like a smart financial business model. It is a failing business model.
Well, yeah, because it doesn't produce revenue. It's a failing business, of course.
Yeah.
If you were in the business of government, you'd be bankrupt day one.
Day one. So you're trying to figure out, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that need help.
Sure.
Again, is it our constitutional responsibility to do that or not? Constitutionally? No. In my opinion, I think where our failure has actually happened is through the churches. In the 1960s, when we created the Medicaid, when we created the Social Security Acts, when we did all these different things, great. But what we did is we took the church's power away from them. We took what their job and their role was away from them. And what are they supposed to do? I mean, they're the sick, the needy, the hungry. That was kind of their role to play within our state.
Sure. I had Reverend Bill Roscoe on months back. Love that guy. Boise Rescue Mission, fantastic human being. But he's not caring for somebody in like a catastrophic car accident.
No.
Right. So like the Medicaid, the government managed healthcare, or at least government provided healthcare. Help me understand this. In the 60s, what was the portion of somebody's, like our average gross income, that was accounted for in like health insurance, because those types of bills have, like, we are in a different age of our nation from, like, say 60 years ago, when it was like, listen, you could afford health insurance. Now, I've actually had to purchase my own health insurance my entire adult life because I've always been self-employed.
Same.
And it's like, well, then, it's like an ungodly amount of money. It's like, how do people do this? Like, I have a family of 5. Like, it's wild to me on, like, my $0 an hour podcast budget. Like it's not going well for Matt and, like, the healthcare world. We did not spend that much of our overall revenue, our overall, like, individual household revenues on health insurance in the 60s. Right? Like, things have changed since then that people have argued to me necessitated assistance from the government.
So again, I'll ask you the question then. What was the change? What do you see as the actual change? Because I mean, I can point to about 10 of them. Well, why our costs are so high, but ask you, why do you think?
Well, insurance actually isn't a bad business model. So there's that, and there's revenue involved there. I think some of the complications come from the enhancement of potential drug therapies. I mean, you have all kinds of problems. Like when my wife was, she was giving birth to one of our kids, they gave her like a Tylenol. I remember this gal, like, reaches in the cabinet, scans this thing. Like, we're in the delivery room and she, like, scans like a barcode, like out of Albertsons. I was like, what the fuck is she doing? And they're like, tears open the bag and hands my wife 2 Tylenol. I was like, bro, I got a Tylenol in the bag. Like, what is it? And it turns, we get the bill. It was like $75 for the 2 Tylenol. So you have this insurance and reimbursement industry and mechanism that is ungodly complicated, is producing an enormous amount of profit for its shareholders. And fine, people need to make money 100%. Sure. So, like, those are just a couple things where it's like, okay, we have a health structure now that didn't exist in its current iteration in the 60s that is producing much higher costs and problems for the end consumer. That's one problem. What would you say the problem is?
I mean, one of the big ones is Medicaid itself. I mean, when you're driving those prices in there, we determine the prices. We determine those aspects of what those costs are going to be. Insurance companies actually set the rate of what they're willing to pay. Usually it's negotiation between what those are. We supplement a lot of things. 340B is a lot of the drugs, especially a lot of the cancer drugs and those are ones that you're paying out of your left pocket instead of your right. That's coming from the federal government. And they give a supplemental drug. So they're giving you a drug at a cheaper rate. And what do we see? The hospitals, they end up turning around and mark those drugs up. I mean, the highest one that I've been able to see is about an 1,800% markup. And again, they're getting them at a cost that we're paying to get a discounted rate. And then they're turning around and raising those rates up. Now, should they be able to do that? Again, that's a federal thing. We're putting a few different bills forward that will help with the reporting side of it, so we can actually get some detailed reporting here within the state on what they're actually doing with it. Is this actually who's benefiting from this? One, the insurance companies are getting hammered most of the time from the hospitals for that. They're the ones getting charged the $75 for the Tylenol. They're the ones that are doing the crazy markups. And
you're saying the hospitals?
The hospitals are one of our largest drivers
of cost
in general.
Gotcha.
I mean, you walk in an emergency room, even if it's no different than you got a nail stuck in your hand, you need to go get somebody to pull it out and squirt some saline or something, iodine, and maybe give you a tetanus shot, versus going to an urgent care and having the same thing done. Your cost is substantial comparably just to walk through that door. Again, is that a justifiable cost or not? I don't know. I would say no. I would say they've been supplemented through all the Medicaid processes. They've been supplemented through all the pharmaceutical costs. They've been supplemented from property tax. The nonprofit hospitals, they get it also a lot of special exemptions. In my opinion, I think you do want a free market, and that as a free market will always weave out those aspects. There's a reason that for people around this area will go to the for-profit surgery centers because it's cheaper. How does a for-profit actually become cheaper? Should almost not make sense, but it actually makes sense. And if you had a couple that competed in that for-profit market, you would actually have a better overall model. You want that competition. But those nonprofits is actually Bernie Sanders, of all people, wrote a scathing letter that came out of his committee in Congress over nonprofit hospitals and what they're actually doing. It's once you get into that nonprofit status, you kind of become this overarching, untouchable type entity. And it doesn't create fair competition. And then what you see is these nonprofits start swallowing up more and more, and it's happened. They just tend to grow bigger and bigger and bigger, where we don't want that. We actually want everybody relatively small. I'd personally rather have a lot more independent doctors than these big, huge monstrosities that you get lost within their system.
Yeah, their managed care systems.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like essentially what you're saying is like, look, when we inserted subsidies and started paying for different things, and cost essentially ballooned out of control, you see this very clearly in a completely different industry, but in the higher education world, when the United States essentially said, okay, look, student debt is the safest debt. Like, it will follow somebody until death, right? Like, this is the way this is going to go. Because of that, people are like, well, let's give them more money. Like, this is better than a car. This is better than a trailer. Like, this debt stays with this person, like his best friend, for the rest of his life until he pays it off. Let's give these people as much money as, and as you increase the safety of that debt service, you increase the amount of money that they were willing to give. And then all of a sudden, universities were not incentivized to keep their costs in check. They're like, well, we can, like, you can borrow $100,000 a year, right? Like, do that. Like, we're going to get you a new rec center.
Yeah, no, 100%. I always go back to Milton Friedman. There's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. The only cause of inflation is either government spending or government borrowing, or printing of money. When you look at that is, so every time we get government involved in certain aspects of things, that's where our problems usually end up. The more we can keep government out of it, the more we can create a free market. Now, creating a regulation, a policy, a law on how they actually operate, I think that's fine. But when you incentivize the funneling of money into institutions, they usually don't work well. I mean, why do you think 93 is the state board and the teachers all freaked out over 93, and they wanted accountability? They wanted all these different things in there. And that's the school choice bill.
Yeah. I'm familiar. Yeah.
But why do they want that? Because honestly, it's competition. You now all of a sudden have competition, and they don't want competition. They know competition is not going to fare very well for them. They said, well, it's because we're regulated. And I had teachers that would come and sit down with me when that bill was going through the House floor, and they'd come sit in my office, and they'd say, this is just a bad idea. This is a bad bill. They should be the same as us. And I said, you guys are wrong. I said that you guys are asking the wrong question. I said, instead of coming down here and asking to stop this, to get a pay increase, I said, sure, you should be wanting to unshackle yourself, but you've allowed you guys yourselves to be shackled down, chained to the floor, your feet chained to the floor, your hands tied behind your back, and told to teach. And that's really and they've allowed that to happen because they were there for pay.
Okay. Question for you. I heard a lot of people that were not fans of 93, not because of competition, but like I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. I'm like, I am pro education in every iteration you can make, right? Same. Like you want to make educational contractors. Like I'm 100% in for that. Like I was in private. That was my entire former life. I did SAT and ACT prep and college entrance. That's all I did all day long, every day for like almost 20 years. I'm all about it. Right. And I was, completely independent, and I had a value proposition that made sense to people, and we agreed upon a price, and they would pay me and I would deliver, and we'd all go on our merry ways. And like kids would get better at math and grammar. And it was like, God bless it, man. We know what pronouns are now. Like, yay. And that was my whole jam. The difficulty that I saw with this was essentially like, okay, but how do I know? Like if I'm we have an in-house landscaping service. Okay. And you're like, hey, landscapers, every 2 weeks, you got to cut that grass down to 1.5 inches, and every 2 months you got to fertilize. You got to do that no matter what. And they're like, okay, great. I'll do it. They're like, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to put this out to bid. Let's put it out to bid, and let's see if somebody can do it cheaper. It's like, great. Are you going to give them like the every 2 weeks to 1.5 inches and every 2 months? They're like, no.
Yeah,
we're not going to do that. We're going to let the park goers determine if the landscapers are doing a good job or not. The in-house landscapers are then like, wait a minute. You told us every 2 weeks and every 2 months you fertilize, and you're just telling them to let the park goers decide. They're like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Again, the teachers should be coming back and fighting to unchain themselves. They should be fighting to actually be able to teach. And I mean, they've been cornered down. I mean, the No Kid Left Behind was the destruction, in my opinion, of education. Honestly,
but like an Idaho teacher's not going against No Child Left. Like I had Andy Grover in from the Idaho Association of, great school administration. There it is. I'm having a hard time getting it out. Anyway, he actually said something like, listen, education's sitting in the center, and no matter where we go, we get sued. I go slightly to the right, we get sued. I go slightly to the left, we get sued. We stay in the center, they still sue us. It was like, there's no, like, we are not designed to be this mass legal litigation system. Right. We're designed to teach like math and grammar, right? But everybody wants their politics inserted into our classrooms, and we just get the hell beat out of ourselves all the time. So like, I ask you, I'm with you. Let's strip away all the regulations. Let's you and I figure this right now. If we are going to go to Superintendent Critchfield, we're going to go to the president of the teachers union. We're going to go to the ISBA. We're going to be like, here's the play, baby. This is what you're going to do. And at the end of this map, it's going to be no regulation for public schools. And like the Idaho public's going to sign off on this too, by the way. What do we do? Like, what's this map? How do they unshackle themselves? Like a bunch of kindergarten teachers, how do they unshackle themselves?
Well, I think part of it is you're going to have to figure out a way to get away from the federal money. I mean, if Trump really does get away from completely dismantle the institution, then honestly, this gives us a chance to do it. There was always a debate actually when Reagan came in, and I really wish he would have, was able to do it, but that's when the National Association was actually created. Was right before he came into office.
What's the National like teachers union?
Yeah, not the teachers union, but the education
educators association.
Yes,
the NEA.
NEA. Yes. So when that all was created, it really was looked at on because the feds were paying for a portion of stuff, and we were also paying for a portion within Medicaid. Those two should have been, and he worked on actually getting that separated to where states, it's education is all on you. We'll take care of the Medicaid aspect. One, we would be in a lot better place if they would have actually done that in the first place. But that was, if he could have got that through, we'd be in a different position across the country right now when it came to education. We follow a lot of these regulations, whether it's the Title IXs, and they don't know where the limits of Title IX actually is. And now we got the boys confused on which bathroom to use, and we think that
we ironed that out in Idaho.
Well, yeah, we did.
So like
we get
that's
sued
other
over
people's
that
problem. Yeah,
we've got the kids that think they're animals that want a dog bowl, and
that's not real though.
No, it is actually real.
Idaho?
Yeah, no. Some of the Boise schools have had that's starting to go back away.
Okay, because I've been dying to get a picture of a kitty litter box or a dog bowl. I've been telling everybody, like, if you have a picture of this in an Idaho public school, God bless you, sir, send it over. Sir, madam, whatever, whoever you are. But like, everybody says, like, we have kitty litter boxes. I'm like, where? They're more elusive than UFOs. Like, I've seen more unidentified flying objects than I've seen litter boxes.
You know, I found out about this from my nephew and niece down in Utah, and they live in a small town in Utah, and they were the ones that were telling me about this, and I think they're called furries.
Oh, sure. A little like foxtail or ears or something.
I don't know. But I don't know. I had to go. I had to actually do a little bit of research on it. It came back and talked to some of the people around here. And they're like, oh, no, they actually come down to the Capitol. They've been down to the Capitol when they've testified over certain things. They've come down in their little outfits. And I guess they do have their little ears on. Now, it's been a few years since that's happened. But we see society generally go through ebbs and weaves within these aspects. Kids are confused anymore these days in general. I mean, social media confuses them.
Sure.
They go to school. They don't, I mean, they don't know how to quite ask. They don't want to over offend somebody, but sometimes offending somebody is usually not always a bad thing. It creates the natural social norms. But
my point is, look, first off, if you and I could snap our fingers right now and eliminate all federal and state regulations on public schools, I guarantee you there's somebody out there that's like, wait a minute, you're taking my money. Like, we have regulations for ITD, we have regulations for ISP, we have regulations for the Department of Ag, blah, blah, and they're like, you're going to take my money and give it to this Department of Education. with no regulations. So just like by the nature of our taxation and redistribution system for the public good, it would seem that we'd still have to maintain some level of regulation in order to justify and defend the taxpayer dollar.
To some degree, yes. But there are a lot of limitations that you can actually do. I mean, realistically, do we need a lot of technology in the classrooms for young kids? Absolutely not.
No.
We should be getting rid of every one of those computers, because I don't know about you. I've had kids go from private school, more academically driven, to private school that are Christian based, and into public school. And the computer they gave in public school, I mean, I sat down to help one of my kids do some homework, and I'm pressing the button and I'm like, why isn't it moving? This is worse than dial-up internet. And I'm like, and pretty soon I'm like yelling at the computer, pressing the button, and I'm going,
why is Daddy so mad?
And my kids are both, they're like, you have to just click and wait. And I'm like, how long do you have to wait for? They're like,
it depends.
It depends. And I said, nope. And I closed it and I threw it over to the side. I said, get in the car. We're going to the store. And I went and bought him a fancy laptop. And I said, how do we get that stuff on here? Because what they have isn't working.
No.
You go back to just, I mean, a projector. Projectors work just fine. I mean, I'm sure you were taught on a projector. I was taught on a projector. Yeah. It was cheap. It was something you could write down. Was the worst case scenario, you changed out a bulb. Your hand might get a little hot. Yeah.
It's wild times.
So if you go back and you look at it, what was the issue that we actually had the technology? Well, it was Bill Gates. Bill Gates went around and he went to Congress and he said, every kid should have a computer in the classroom. Every kid should have a computer. So they went this national program and they pushed out all technology and sent out the cheapest, shittiest computer you could possibly find.
And then you got to use their programs
and
licenses. And now the textbook manufacturers are like, hey, don't pay me $125 for the actual textbook. Pay me $75 for the digital one.
Yep.
They have a one-time cost. There's like, listen, you and I are ferociously in alignment on this one, man. Like I couldn't agree with you more. It is absolutely a bastardization of what education used to be.
So you can either try to work on stripping all the stuff away, which everything you try to strip away is going to be a fight. Oh,
yeah.
Or you can show a better system, something that's going to work. And then this system is going to go, we're losing out. We get paid for kids in the seats where, we've got some additional funds that we're guaranteed to get no matter what, but we are going to shrink down to nothing if we do not figure out a way. And then it makes these guys, the current school system as it is,
you have to
adapt to the newer model. And that's what you want. So the more regulations you put over here, the more problems that they're going to, you're never going to be able to completely get rid of those ones.
If I may ask that, if you look at Renaissance High School versus Bishop Kelly, Renaissance High School, which is a public school, has higher SAT scores than Bishop Kelly.
Yeah.
I'm for competition, but let me ask you this. How do we even know if the private school is producing better academic results?
I think it depends on the private school. And again, I think this is the whole aspect that government has taken over what's best for your child.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, you're saying, hey, look, we're going to produce, this is going to be a better system. I'm not against private education. 100%. My kids were in private education in my former state. I was a private educator. I'm not against private education. But how do we know if education is the goal? The state of Idaho is going to take money away from me under threat of imprisonment. How do they prove to me that it's actually going to the said goal of education?
Well, I think you're going to have to get to the point where what your go on rate actually looks like. What is that? I mean, we're trying to make not just an educated kid, but a well-rounded kid that's coming out. Most kids in today and regular in some of these large high schools, I mean, their anxiety, I couldn't believe the numbers. I can't remember exactly what percentage of the kids were actually on some type of SSRI from anxiety.
Right.
It's insane. And so that shouldn't be the case. Kids should not, I mean, when you deal with a private school, you can deal with private individual aspects of different things. I mean, especially for my daughter, I mean, she completely excels in a private, small Christian school. She didn't like a big school. It didn't fit her model really well. I mean, she was an introvert. Everybody's got a different box. I did well. I went through public school just fine.
I wouldn't imagine public school would ruffle your feathers at all.
Yeah. No.
Nope.
I went through Boise State, and I've got multiple degrees from Boise State. The last one was executive MBA. I was a single kid when I was young in my early 20s, still down there going for my undergrad. And arguing over socialized healthcare back then. And I mean, the teachers up there pushing their socialistic ideas upon the kids. Socialized medicine is the greatest thing, and this will fix our system. Look at these other countries. They're great. And
was that pre-TikTok videos of Canada?
That was pre-TikTok videos. That was pre-TikTok. That was over 20 years ago.
Did you see one of the recent social media clips of Canada? It was like people are standing outside waiting in line for this new clinic that just opened up. People were there for like 5 hours. I don't know anything about it. I saw that video.
I need a knee replacement. I'm going to go put on a wait list. Well, 8 months, you can go ahead and get this dealt with. So you can't really do anything for 8 months. And socialized, like socialism in general, doesn't work. It's been a provenly failed system. The idea of it for a lot of people sounds great, but it never is an actual functional thing. It destroys countries very, very fast. I was just talking to somebody that was from the Netherlands that, because a lot of people use them as like this great system. And they're like
utopian system.
They're like, we pay 60% of our everything we make. And we get some benefits from it, but not 60% worth. And we still have to wait in line for everything.
They have gigantic instances of depression as well. You also stifle innovation because people just aren't incentivized.
No. Why do anything more?
Yeah.
So again, this capitalistic, this free market idea is always the best thing. Idaho, or not just Idaho, the country is still on the verge. I think you're seeing a shift back within President Trump, kind of that more ideological, the idea of a free market, the idea of, we saw it shift a lot of the tax incentive in it, shifted away from businesses, shifted it to this workforce housing aspect. From a business model, build apartments. You will make a lot of money doing it. You can pretty much buy it with no money down. You can use government money to subsidize. You don't have to have hardly any cash tied up into it. And it's a cash flowing cow for you. It's a great business model, but we have subsidized it to make it that way. And does anybody really want to live in an apartment? I don't know. Maybe some Democrats. I don't know any Republicans that really want to live on top of each other.
I was thinking about this just the other day. What do all the 18-year-olds do? Or 22-year-olds? You graduate high school, you want to move out. Who are the people that have a down payment for a house?
Yeah.
Like when you're 22, like I lived in the backyard in somebody's like 2-car garage, which was converted into half an apartment and half storage. So I only got half of the 2-car garage. And buddy, I was the king of my castle. Like, but I didn't have, like, who has the money? I understand apartments or people that recently, I know a couple right now that is going through, very unfortunately, like a divorce. They don't have an additional down payment. They need secure housing for, like they do week on, week off in the house, but like they need a viable housing alternative for them and their kids when, we switch around. So it's kind of like, there are phases in the life and times in life where it's like, absolutely, you need an apartment. And I don't know that, I don't know a group of people who are like, apartment living long-term, like lifelong, is the best in the absence of like, really bad rent control. I do know a guy who spends like $700 a month for like a $5,000 apartment. Unbelievable to me that that's a thing. But the point is like, yeah, people don't, perhaps everybody would love to be homeowners, but that's not reality for our entire population.
Well, it would be when we actually go through a true recession, because government keeps bailing us out of every recession that actually happens.
You're saying 18-year-olds, when they leave out their house, will be able to buy a house instantaneously, and the only reason they can't is because Lieutenant Governor Betke's like bailing us out?
No, this is a federal aspect.
Oh, I thought you said Betke. I was like, what did he do?
No.
Sorry, I misunderstood you.
No.
Yeah. Listen, I don't want to make you late. I'm sorry, Representative. Like, we are obviously, this is a great conversation. We gotta find a time when we have more time.
No, sounds good. No, what the issue really comes down to is what does it cost to actually, we've gotten rid of our timber industry. That's the lumber aspect. Your lumber packages are through the roof at this point in time. Labor costs have gone up. Why did labor costs go up? You look at Biden when he first when he was running for president, actually, he came out and said it. He goes, I want a $15 hour minimum wage. And everybody kind of laughed at him. Well, you do that through inflation. You do that through cause and effect. You drive so much money into government in general, and that's what he did. He spent trillions of dollars dumped through government. That's one of the reasons our government in the state of Idaho and across the country has grown. Like, the rate of growth of government in the last 4 years is unbelievable. It doesn't even match in any model that you could possibly imagine.
In Idaho?
Oh yeah. So
what has our government done in the last 4 years?
Well, a lot of that had to do with ARPA. So ARPA was the American
temporary
First.
funds, right?
Yeah, temporary funds.
Okay,
But
so-
within that, you actually grew government within that. Now you're trying to figure out a way to stabilize it. We constantly have agencies come back and say, well, we need more money for this program that we started. Was not supposed to be done for that, but that is what we've done. But when you dump that amount of money in there, that money just usually flows through to trustee and benefits. Whether we're out doing roads, whether we're out starting another program, we're out funding some other groups. Anytime you do that and you're putting that much money into the economy, what actually happens? Inflation. We've seen inflation go up. It wasn't a disruption due to COVID. We had slight increases due to that from some shortages from other countries, but overall, we went after that hump. Kind of, we went over that. I mean, TVs are back down.
But the cost of, understood everything you're saying, but the cost of, let's say, housing here, like I'm part of the problem and I'm neither government nor am I COVID. Like
You came from California?
Well, that's a problem, right? But also just because I came from somewhere else, like anywhere else, I could have, whatever. So you have a fixed number of goods or you can't swell the number of houses proportionate to the number of people that want to purchase them. Plus we have all kinds of, I'm still trying to, like, if I may ask, and I know this is very personal, but like, how old were you when you purchased your first house? Like, did you avoid apartments your entire adult life?
I bought my first house at, I think I just turned 20.
Great. Like, what's that model? Like, what did you go into that generated a down payment within 24 months of graduating high school?
Nothing. I worked all the way through high school, from when I was young, and I saved every dollar I possibly could. By the time I graduated high school, I had $30,000 in the bank. And that was back into the 90s. So it's definitely I would recommend everybody not buy a house at today's market because it's unsustainable. It doesn't.
Okay,
make
so
any
then we
sense.
need apartments for people that move here. If you're recommending we don't buy houses and people are still moving here, then we need somewhere to store them.
Well, people are moving here because the sense of what you're gaining from it. The problem is that we don't have the stability within Idaho. We don't have the jobs. We've got 2 Fortune 500 companies within Idaho. We don't have the jobs that are going to pay the $100,000+ a year for you to stay here. Now the remote workforce, that is why a lot of people are staying here. We have the retired older people coming here.
Sure.
But again, that's a short-term aspect. Those people will die. I mean, they're towards their end. Those people will die. All of a sudden, is more people going to move in? Costs. Either way, no matter where you go, except for California, California's been this odd model in general, no matter what you look at, no matter how you look at it. And that's one of the reasons they're so far in debt is because of how they've actually operated. And again, bad business model. But you look at Idaho right now, you got the cost of living or the pay, what your pay is versus the cost of living's here. We know that this naturally happens. Displacements happen all the time like this.
Sure.
And what usually is a fix is an actual recession or a potential depression, but you always hope never for the depression, but the recessions are not a bad thing. They get things to balance out. So either this has got to come down or this has to come up. Now, for this to come up, one, that's why cutting income tax is so important, because then you can maybe incentivize businesses to come here. Big businesses that will actually pay the jobs. Micron, I mean, they're going to offer a lot of jobs, but a lot of the jobs are going to offer about $70,000 a year jobs. What does that buy you? I mean, apartment plus. Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't see us actually doing this. The only thing that's going to happen is this eventually has to come down. Now, when businesses, when we go into a downturn, I mean, we've seen this happen multiple times way before the work from home thing was popular nationwide. But HP had done it. HP actually turned around, and when they said, "Okay, we're going to require everybody from that was work from home to actually, we're going to go call back to the office," and you had to go either move to an area where that facility was at, or you left and had to go find a different job. So we'd see mass exiting all the time. Luckily, at that point in time, HP had a facility here, so people would actually come back to Idaho, and it was actually a good incentive for Idaho, but we don't have even an HP here anymore, really. So barely a presence.
So it sounds like what you're saying is the hope is wages and your capacity to live are here with how much money you can generate, and the cost of, say, like housing is up here. And what your hope is that we experience a mass contraction that doesn't necessarily break people, but makes everything way more affordable. And so that we have that equalization of like, okay, maybe we went from $70,000 average to like 75, but we also went from like a $900,000 house to a $700,000 house and lower interest rates.
Well, and an evaluation of house is just current market value.
Yeah, I'm just whatever it might be.
The markets are going to shift no matter what. If you focused on the deregulation aspect, if you focused on the logging and on the timber side, you focused on the manufacturing back in the United States, you focused on all those aspects of things. Labor is still going to be on the higher end, and that's still 50% of your cost when you're building in general. But if your material is 25% lower, you could build a new house cheaper than than your house is worth over here. That's existing currently. Your housing prices based on buy-sell ratios will actually naturally drop. So if you can drop the cost of things, this actually goes down. I mean, that is a sense of a way to do it. There's multiple ways.
The replacement value assessment is a very classic way to do it.
And that's why it's important. I mean, we keep pushing on like these energy codes. We actually are looking at cutting out. I mean, there's a discussion right now and kind of a fight back and forth that failed in committee in JFAC, which was a $24 million federal deal through, and was kind of the Green New Deal aspect that pushed for higher energy efficiency appliances. And again, we put I was the guy that got language in that says you cannot use these to push energy codes above the current energy code.
Energy efficiency is not bad. I'm sorry I took a deep breath. I have exhaustion from like, oh, we're going to have more efficiency here. And then we're going to require like remove, natural gas appliances here. And then like everybody's working off of like electric water heaters. And then like, the power grid's going down. It's like, my hands are sweating. Like I'm sweating over here. I'm like, I can't. It's like, I have an appreciation for not loving that. Listen, I don't want to take advantage of your time here.
No, you're good.
Let's do this. I would love to have you back on. Obviously, we're just like scratching the surface. I would love to also talk to you about the broader ways that we could make this area a more affordable area. I read an article just a couple months ago. It was like Idaho and Boise in general are by now like the second most unaffordable place to live.
100%.
And one of the main reasons I moved here, like easily top 3, is because my wife and I looked around and we're like, our children will never be able to come back to where we are. And that really upset both of us. And we saw this place as an avenue for perhaps they will have an opportunity. Like it looks much more viable. So what you're talking about, which is like, look, we need to fix things so that we have accessibility for people in their early 20s. Like my wife and I purchased our first place in our early 20s as well. I was unique. We were unique compared to the people we knew. It sounds like you're unique. I mean, obviously go get her. But again, I'd love to have this broader conversation with you. I just don't want to run you over time. So
yeah, sounds good.
Let's call it. Let's reschedule. We'll go from there. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Thank you for what you're doing for Idaho, sir. I appreciate you.
You as well.